everybody. Welcome to another episode of Over This Should podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Sabrina Trobak, a therapist and author of Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. Sabrina specializes in helping individuals understand and transform their core beliefs, particularly those rooted in feelings of inadequacy and lack of value. Through her holistic approach, she guides clients on a healing journey that encompasses the mind, body, and spirit. Join us today as we delve into the transformative power of challenging and changing our core beliefs. Welcome to the show, Sabrina. Is there anything I missed or anything else you'd like to say about yourself?
It was a pretty good summary for sure. Yeah, I was a teacher for about 20 years, and towards the end of my teaching career, I was in school counseling, and I went to a workshop on suicide. And at the end of the 3-day workshop, I thought, this is what I need to do. So I contacted the presenter. His name was Tony Martins, and we went back and forth for about a year. And then he decided to take me on as a protege and taught me his model of therapy, which is really looking at everything that we do from our core belief. So core belief for a lot of people is feeling not good enough, not important, not valued, especially if you've had a lot of trauma, if you have high anxiety, depression, you just don't really feel happy or content. And so we constantly are trying to prove to ourselves that what we believe about ourselves is true. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm going to be drawn to people, places, things, perceptions that reinforce and support that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. So in order to make a really long-term change, you have to go back and challenge that core belief and develop core belief good enough, important, and valued so it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So that's basically what I do, is help people change that core belief.
That's such powerful and important work. And so often we don't even realize the programming that's running in our brain that is not truth. It's just a thought. From a core belief perspective, can you talk to the audience about where do they come from? How do they develop? How do they get programmed into our brain?
So it's some people will say, oh, I remember this one thing that happened, and that was what kind of got me. But it's not usually what it is. It's usually a combination of a whole bunch of things. And often that one thing is kind of the tipping point that kind of sends us over the edge. But if we really look back even farther, we see there's a lot of little things. So it's subtle little comments, little digs that kind of happen, parents that aren't around or don't have a lot of patience, getting up into much more significant trauma. But one of the things that we see really significant kind of across the board is just not being able to feel our emotions. And so we're often taught, even from really young age, to just suppress and push our emotions down.
Mm-hmm.
A little kid breaks their toy, parent right away wants to make them feel better when really they should feel sad and angry and frustrated that their toy broke. That's a natural response to the thoughts of their toy breaking. But parents right away need to try to make their child feel better, because if my child is feeling emotion, that creates emotion in me. I don't want to feel my emotion, so I need to shut down my child's emotion. So we look at all of our experiences that we go through, they all create emotion. And generally what we're taught is push those emotions down. Well, we push them down, push them down, push them down, push them down. Gets harder and harder and harder to cope. Now my belief in myself becomes more and more impacted that I can't handle things, because now even just daily life is too much because I've got all this emotion that I've been holding in.
One of the metaphors I like to use for that is thinking about being in a pool and you have the pool or the beach ball and you're trying to push that ball underwater. So to me, that's the numbing. That's shopping or eating or whatever that might be for you. You're pushing that underwater, but that ball cannot stay underwater. Our emotions cannot stay suppressed. One day they're going to pop up in an explosive way out of the water. And it might show up in a way that isn't even representative of who we want to be. So it's better to address the emotions in the moment, but it is hard work to get comfortable with feeling all of the feelings when we're often told that our feelings should be happy and joyful and positive versus anything else.
Absolutely. And I think even with that, the beach ball analogy, the longer you hold it down, the harder it gets to hold it
Mm-hmm.
down. It takes more and more effort year after year after year to hold that beach ball under the water. And then when it does come up, it often comes up more and more explosively as
Right.
time goes on too. So it gets harder and harder and harder for sure. Yeah, we talk about let's say somebody who a child who goes through divorce. Well, if that divorce happens and the child is just kind of ignored and they're not really talking a lot, they're kind of informed, mom and dad are getting divorced, and then there's a lot of quiet, there's not a lot of things happening, there's new people brought into the relationship, but it's not really discussed with the child's going to struggle. Whereas if I have a child whose parents are being divorced, that both parents are able to sit down and have a conversation with the child, talk with the child about what they're feeling, and helping them kind of sort through and understand it as the divorce is happening and life is moving on and parents are moving on with their lives. They're checking in with their child, seeing how they're doing, talking with them about their emotions and how they're feeling about everything that's going on. That divorce is not going to have as significant an impact on them because they're able to process and sort through the emotions as they're going through it, rather than just having to kind of ignore and suppress it. Now, that's challenging because when parents are going through a divorce, it creates a lot of emotion for the parents too. The more a parent is struggling, the harder it is to reach out and connect with other people. Generally, the more we're struggling, the more inward we become. So when parents are having a really hard time, it's even harder for them to connect with their child, but that's often when the child needs it the most. So it
Mhm.
becomes this really significant issue where it's really hard for us to just talk about our emotions and figure out what's going on, especially in our society where, kind of like you said, we can feel happy, maybe a little bit angry once in a while, but that's it. We're not supposed to feel rejection, lonely, abandoned, vulnerable, unheard. Those
Mhm.
emotions, we just push them down.
Yeah. So in that scenario where the parent is divorcing, would your recommendation be that they're striving to create a space for their child to show up authentically and experience emotions? Should that parent also show up in the same way and be vulnerable with their child, or do they have a responsibility to try to keep it all together? What does that look like in a healthy relationship?
So, the model of therapy that I practice says that parents need to be the rock, they need to be the stone. They should not be showing a bunch of emotion to their child. And I know that kind of goes against what we hear a lot of in society of, oh, no, we need to express our emotions, we need to show our emotions. I can teach my child to feel their emotions by feeling my emotions.
Mm.
Maybe that's true, but the problem with that is then they are not going to come to you and talk to you. So if you think about your own personal life, there's going to be people in your life that you can talk to, and there's people that you don't really talk to. And if you look at the people you don't really talk to, it's often because they've got so much going on already. They don't need extra. You don't really think they can handle it because they're really emotional. That's the same with child and parent. If my child feels like I can't handle the conversation because I'm getting angry because there's shoes in the front entranceway and I'm getting overwhelmed because the toast is burnt, they are not going to come and talk to me about problems that are really going on. But
Mhm.
if I present as, I got this, let's have a conversation, we can talk about anything, I can handle it, you can come and talk to me about anything, then they're going to be more open to come and talk to me about whatever it is that's going on for them. So
Mhm.
it's really important that we are still feeling our emotions. But again, this is where it gets challenging because I can't do it in the moment. So I have to push the emotion down, go and find time on my own where I can feel my emotions and sort through it. Well, maybe by then it's kind of dissolved and I can't really find it as easily. So I have to do some work to try to dig it back up. But
Mhm.
generally, what we say is feel your emotions, but do it more on your own.
Very interesting. So going back to earlier in the conversation, you were working in the school system. The person came in and spoke, and the suicide piece piqued your curiosity. You went on to get some training, and have you now connected suicide with the core beliefs? Is that part of what's brought this all together?
It's one of the pieces of it for sure. If we look at people that are thinking about suicide or even have attempted suicide, the vast majority of people don't really want to die. They just
Mhm.
want the hurt and the pain and the loneliness to end, and they don't see a way out of it. And as time goes on, that way out becomes less and less and less. So now the idea of suicide becomes more and more significant. If we look at those thoughts of suicide and what's underneath it, we often see a very significant core belief of feeling not good enough, not important, not valued. We see an incredible amount of suppressed and pushed down emotion where they don't know how to deal with and process and sort through their emotions. They don't feel safe to be able to do that. So they're holding all this stuff in, gets harder and harder to cope with. So suicide becomes more and more and more of a possibility.
I'm curious about my own personal belief system and that I've had a lot of therapy on and a lot of working through, but I hear it with other women too. And it's how can we simultaneously hold this belief that we are not enough and yet we are too much for people? How can those two things coexist in our brains?
Often the too much for people is a way of coping with feeling not enough.
Hmm. Tell me more
So,
about that.
so we often try to kind of prove that we are good enough, right? So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I often will try to prove to other people that I'm good enough. So I'm going to be really busy. I'm going to volunteer in everything that's possible because then I'll be good enough. I'm going to, micromanage everybody because then I'll be good enough. So we're trying to prove that we're good enough. And often that can come off as being too much or being over the top. But it really is a symptom of trying to prove that you are good enough. When you really truly believe you are good enough, you don't need to prove that to anyone else because you really truly believe it within yourself.
Hmm.
So balance becomes more of a key, right? Not good enough, not important, not valued. We often see imbalance where it's going from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, overcompensating. I would say
Exactly.
I have definitely faced that. What challenges do people face when they are going to question their core beliefs, when they are bringing that to the surface, when they are challenging their own core beliefs?
Well, I think the very first step is even becoming aware it's there. For a lot of people and a lot of my clients, when they first come in, our very first meeting, we talk about the core belief. They're like, I never knew that was there, but yeah, that rings so true to me. So if I don't even know it's there, I can't do anything about it. I don't even know I should do anything about it. Talk
Mhm.
about over the should, right? Yeah, right. We don't even know we're supposed to do anything about it. So first part is just becoming aware of it. And honestly, once you even become aware of it, you're starting to challenge that core belief because now it isn't just overpowering you and controlling you from lack of awareness. Now you can start to become aware and you can start to go, oh, wait, that's that core belief. I don't
Mhm.
want to feed that anymore. We often see a lot of people have anxiety with that core belief, not good enough, not important, not value. So getting a better understanding of anxiety and how it works and what's going on makes you feel more empowered in managing that anxiety.
I think that's really powerful. And I'm wondering, I don't want you to give away the keys to the kingdom to the book because it looks incredible. Could you give us some guidance on how to create the self-awareness?
The book really is about helping you get a better understanding of where is your core belief, how does it develop over the years, and what can you do to challenge it and gain a better understanding of it. Basically, the book it's written for people with anxiety. Being a teacher for 20 years, I was a learning assistant teacher, so I know that people with anxiety struggle with reading because it creates anxiety. So
Mm.
how do you write a book for people who don't really want to read books? It gets a little challenging. The book is written in very small chunks. You can read 2 or 3 paragraphs, you've read a section, and you can put it down. There's a lot of visuals, a lot of charts, and a lot of activities. So you basically read a small amount of information, and then you apply your own personal experiences to that information in a little chart or activity that's there. So as you're going through, you're really learning more about yourself, understanding your core belief more, becoming more aware of that core belief so then you can challenge it more significantly as well.
How does exploring the mind, body, spirit connection, how does pulling all that together in a holistic practice help your clients?
I think we spend a lot of time putting band-aids on things,
Mm.
right? So, I have anxiety. Well, I can teach you how to cope with anxiety in 2 or 3 sessions, but then you have to cope with anxiety for the rest of your life. I can teach you to cope with anger in 2 or 3 sessions, but then you have to cope with anger for the rest of your life. But if we really look at what's feeding these behaviors, what's going on, look at a much deeper level, a more holistic level, now I'm going to get a better understanding of why it's there. So that's why we're looking at the mind, body, emotions, and spirit. Mind, we want to see how fast is your brain racing? How much are you not able to fall asleep because you can't shut your brain off? How much are there negative thoughts, worry thoughts, anxious thoughts? So we want to get a better understanding of what that anxiety looks like. Then we look at the body. The body is a really important piece because generally we see, if we look at that holistic approach, if there's a fracture in one area, there's a fracture in all areas. So people who have high anxiety, what happens is we get adrenaline dumped into our body. Well, if I have a lot of anxiety where I'm going into that fight, flight, freeze response many, many, many times a day because of my anxious thoughts, and adrenaline is constantly being dumped into my body, that is going to have a major impact on me physically. What happens when we get that adrenaline rush is the energy has to come from somewhere. So what happens is all of our non-vital organs get zapped of energy. So bladder, bowel, immune system, endocrine system, stomach, kidney, pancreas, skin, they all get zapped of energy. So if I'm going into this fight, flight, freeze hundreds of times a day because I have high anxiety, my stomach is being zapped of energy 100 times a day. It's not going to function properly. And so we see people with a lot of physical illnesses or physical problems because their anxiety is so high, because their body is constantly in recovery mode from this fight, flight, freeze response that's happening, that their body is never really getting a chance to heal. When my clients come into me, one of the first things we do is we get them to go and get a full blood work. Now, I'm in Canada, so we can do that for free. It doesn't cost anything. So it's a bit of a different situation than in the States. If there's an issue there, we need to figure it out. If a client has low iron or low vitamin B or their thyroid isn't working properly, counseling is not going to help those things. So we need to make sure the body is working and functioning the way it should be working. Then we can start with the counseling. If the blood work comes back and everything's good, then I know, okay, everything's good. This is more of a psychological, mental health, anxiety piece that we need to work on. So mind, body, emotions, again, suppressing emotions, we push them down. So we want to look at what are the emotions people are a bit more comfortable to feel. Often that is happy and angry. What are the ones that they push down and avoid? And what are the coping strategies they use to push those down? So like you said, the shopping, the overeating, the alcohol, the drug, the cheating, the lying, the stealing. What are the coping strategies we're using to push down and suppress those emotions? And then we look at spirit. What are our values and our beliefs? What do we believe in loyalty, in a sense of family, in work ethic, in the medical system, the political system, in our general values around relationships? We want to look at a person as a whole. Then we start to figure out and sort through how to challenge that core belief with the person as a whole.
That's a really great explanation. And the body connections, I think that's really important. You mentioned that people don't mind experiencing happiness and anger, but other emotions are harder. So what emotions do you find people really struggle with expressing?
Pretty much everything else.
Wow.
So, fear is a massive one. Fear stops most people dead in their tracks. We get opportunities, we always hear, there's doors opening. There's doors opening all around us, but the vast majority of us don't ever look up to see them because it's too scary. We don't know what's on the other side of that. And so we often, as soon as fear starts to crop up, we stop, we go in a different direction and avoid it. So fear is a real driving emotion that most of us don't want to feel. Vulnerable. Ooh, most don't like to feel vulnerable, especially if we've been hurt as children where we did feel vulnerable. So we shut that off. But other ones that are actually really hard for people to feel are feeling loved and feeling connected, truly feeling loved and connected. They don't happen as much. So we don't get to experience them as much and let them in. So then when they do, they can really hit us. A lot of people talk about, positive and negative emotions. They're not good or bad. They're not right or wrong. They are simply a physiological response to our thoughts that we are having.
Would it be true to say that it's easier to feel the anger and the rejection emotions because it proves our negative core beliefs? Like we're self-validating by feeling those rejection and anger emotions.
Absolutely. They feed and support the core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. What we say about anger is that anger is not a standalone emotion. There's emotions underneath anger that we don't like to feel. Rather than feeling those emotions, I switch it to anger. Anger's been more socially acceptable for centuries, right? It's almost a sign of confidence. If you're really angry, you're kind of the one that people look up to, right? Going right back to ancient Rome kind of thing. But really, if you stop and think about a time that you felt angry, there's other emotions underneath that, like loneliness, fear, sad, vulnerable, unheard, rejection. We don't like to feel those emotions. Switch it to anger. Now I don't have to feel those emotions. Anger allows me to suppress the emotion, but it also keeps everybody at a bit of a distance. So I can feel a bit safer because I don't have to let anyone in where I might feel vulnerable or rejection. But then it also reinforces and supports that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, because you're damaging relationships and ultimately keeping everybody at a distance. So then you feel lonely and sad because you're keeping everyone at a distance.
Mm.
So the thing you're doing to try to protect yourself is actually creating more harm and reinforcing and supporting that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued.
Amazing. I feel like I'm at a mental health sermon. And so not good enough, I think, is an incredibly common feeling, which is probably why you wrote a whole entire book about it. How do you recommend people work through? I know that you said self-awareness, but what advice would you give to listeners who feel like they're not good enough? What should they be doing?
So I think, first of all, you want to exactly do that, become aware and realize, oh, yep, there's that core belief. So if we always stop and kind of think, what am I feeling? What's the emotions that are going on? And what core belief is being triggered? That's going to prove to be very enlightening over time. Then we have to get better at just feeling our emotions. Now, if I've been spending decades suppressing my emotions, now I have to feel them. I'm not even going to know what emotions are. So one of the things I always give my clients is a list of emotions. I have a list on my website, but I mean, really, if you Google emotions on the internet, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of hits for it. Print off a list of emotion, print off 4, 5, 6 copies of it, and place them around your house. Put one on your fridge, one in the living room, one in your bedroom, one in your car. And when you're feeling something, stop and look at the list. And as you read through that list, those emotions that you are feeling, they will jump out the page at you. So now you can start to get a better idea of what you are actually feeling. It's actually extremely rare that we feel one emotion. It's usually a combination of 3, 5, 10, 15 different emotions all at the same time. So if I'm going to start to feel my emotions, that can be really overwhelming because that's a lot. But if I just read, just reading the word confused, frustrated, overwhelmed, sad, unheard, not belonging, then I can start to allow myself to feel the emotion. So even just reading the words allowed me to feel them. Once I get comfortable with that, then I want to start saying the words out loud. And so now I'm saying them out loud. That's going to create even more emotion. So I'm starting to allow myself to feel my emotions a little bit more. Then I can start to do some writing where I write about the emotions and what I'm feeling and get better at letting those emotions out. And then if you can let it out and actually have a good cry or really just sit in your emotions and let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling, you will feel better on the other side. I think we all know that after we have a good cry, there's always a bit of a sense of relief after. So we need to get better at feeling that emotion and letting it out. But if you've spent your whole life pushing it down, that is not an easy task to do. It takes a lot of conscious effort to really challenge yourself to do that.
Yes, I just did an activity. I can't remember the exact name of it. I think it was called the vulnerable list, where you had to put people in your life on the left-hand side. So mom, dad, partner, best friends, whatever, on the left-hand side. And then the vulnerable event that occurred with them. And then the vulnerable feelings you felt. And I had to do what you just said. I was finding myself saying disappointed or scared, and my vocabulary was limited. So I had to go Google
Yeah.
emotion lists so I could come up with things and, irritated, sad, scared, anxious, so many more words to choose from that I think really helps you recognize in the moment this isn't just anger. This is fear. This is fear of failure. There's so many different ways that build up into these very few emotions we think exist. I'm really glad you pointed that out and think that's, obviously wonderful. That's why you have a wait list that you share that with your clients. I have another question. I know a lot of women who love journaling, myself included. And I heard you say write it out earlier. Do you recommend journaling as a technique?
For sure. Journaling is a really helpful coping strategy, especially if you're feeling like there's something going on, but you don't know what it is. You just feel off and unsettled. Writing helps us tap more into those unconscious thoughts. So often when we're writing, we'll come up out with things that we didn't even know were going on. So writing can be a really helpful tool. But because we're tapping more into those unconscious, what's also is really good is give it a bit of time, a couple hours a day, go back and read what you wrote. That can often be very enlightening where you kind of go, oh, geez, I didn't even know that was what was going on. So writing is really important. You know, a lot of my clients say, can you give me topic sentence to write about? I kind of shy away from that because we need our brain to go wherever it needs to go. And if I give it a specific topic, my brain automatically is going to focus on that topic. But
Mhm.
maybe there's something way over on the other side that I need to be dealing with and sorting through more. So what I usually say to my clients is there's two main topics you want to talk about when you're doing your journaling. What am I feeling and what am I thinking? And if you start with that, like what am I then thinking today? I feel off, and just let your brain go where it needs to go. Don't try to control it. Don't try to manage it. Don't worry about spelling and grammar and all this stuff. This is not academic writing. It is emotional writing. So if you end up repeating yourself 4 times, that tells you something. That's
Mhm.
something that has been going on that's bothering you, that it's coming up that many times. Use that as a cue to help you realize, okay, there's a piece that I need to work on for sure. One of the things we often see in journaling too is we'll often talk about the events, right? So, I got in trouble at work. My dog ran away. I don't know if I'm going to have enough money to pay the bill this month. And so we list all these things, which is fine, but now we need to go back and look at the emotions. So I got in trouble at work. What emotions did that create? My dog ran away. What emotions does that create? Finances. What emotions does that create? So going back and writing about the emotions. So even if that means, now you grab a different color pen and you go back and write over top of what you wrote and just wrote the emotions that are there. That's really important too. So we need to make sure we're tackling those emotions when we're doing our journaling as well.
That makes sense. From a journaling perspective, go back a few hours later, a couple days later, and read it. I wonder, is it helpful? I'll speak for myself. I I have been working to overcome that perfectionism, people pleasing trait that seems to have been part of my core belief that I had to be those things to be loved. So I'm always very quick to assume good intentions and forgive. And a few years ago, I decided I would really start journaling through events and feelings that I was having in a relationship. And I'm curious, do you think that journals should be read long after events have occurred, or do you write them out, feel the feelings, close them, and put them away so as not to reactivate or relive?
Well, I mean, I would agree with that. If you're doing it to beat yourself up and reactivate and relive, don't do it. But if you're doing it to become more aware, to see how much you've grown, then
Mhm.
it can be very beneficial. Again, coping strategies are not really about the coping strategies. It's about how we use them that makes them healthy or unhealthy. So if I'm going back and looking at journaling from 2, 3 years ago with the purpose of what were my thoughts? How am I going to learn how to grow? How do I continue to grow and challenge on my journey? How do I look at my journals and go, wow, you know what? I've come a really long way. Then that's probably of benefit. But if I'm going to go back and look at my journals and beat myself up over it, then it's not going to be of benefit.
Mhm. That makes sense. I have really enjoyed this conversation. What do you need listeners to know about your book, how to get it, what they should expect from it?
So the book is available on Amazon.com in the US and Amazon.ca in Canada. There's a link for it on my website. So my website is trobakholistic.org. It does go into more detail about the book and gives you some reviews and different things like that. I'm also on social media where I do little blurbs where I talk about certain areas around the core belief and our thinking process. So people are welcome to kind of take a look at those. The book is based on a lot of those kind of ideas. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what the book might be like, you could take a look at my YouTube, and my Facebook is Trobak Holistic Counseling. My Instagram is NGE, so that's for not good enough, NGE_Trobak. My TikTok, which I've just started, is NGE_core_belief. Again, the book is written in really small chunks. There's very few pages that are full text two pages. Almost every single page spread has something to break it up and chunk it so it's easier to read. It's written at a very readable level. It's written at about a grade 6, 7, 8 reading level. So it's easy to read. It doesn't have a lot of big words. It's written for the average person, not for a counselor, not for a psychologist. It's written in very layman's terms, very easy to read and very easy to understand. And then you can apply your own personal experiences to it as well.
That's wonderful. And I did go look at your Instagram yesterday to get a little bit more acclimated with who you are. And you have great reels that are full of little nugget drops, and then you have some posts that do the same thing. So I will link all of that into the show notes for the listeners to be able to access you, and definitely recommend you check out Instagram and TikTok to get a better feeling for what Sabrina offers, but also to get those knowledge nuggets and takeaways on how to start changing and challenging your core beliefs. Because once we believe we're good enough, we show up differently without that imbalanced, too much, not good enough. So I think it's critically important, especially as women, where society's telling them how they should behave. And that's why we're over this should. It's great to be able to challenge those core beliefs and get crystal clear on your own purpose, your own value, the spirit part you talked about earlier, like your integrity, your values, how you want to show up. And I'm so grateful, Sabrina, for the work that you're doing and what you're bringing into the world to help people get more comfortable with their authentic self.
Thank you for having me. It was great being here. I enjoyed our conversation.
Before you go, I always ask the
Okay.
guest, what is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is actually from Tony Martin's, and it is well, there's two. First one is everything we do for a reason. So we always need to look past the behavior and understand what's really going on at a deeper level. And then the other quote is if you don't do something different, nothing's going to change. And so we need to keep challenging ourselves to do something different.
I love that. Perfectly aligns with the message of challenging the core beliefs. That's wonderful. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for being here. It's a true pleasure. And for everybody who doesn't know it, it's 5 a.m. for Sabrina, and she showed up looking fabulous, not a minute late, and just crushed the interview today. I really appreciate you. Thank you for all the wisdom you brought us.
Thanks. Take care.